When we think about our breeds of cattle, all of our breeds of cattle will fall in three distinct breed types. The first breed type that we'll talk about will be our British breeds of cattle. In our British breeds of cattle, the most common ones that we'll look at, the ones that we have in Texas, our steer shows will have breeds. Those within the British breed types will include our Angus, Red Angus, Hereford, Polled Hereford, and then finally Shorthorn. The British breeds of cattle are typically a little bit earlier maturing cattle, cattle that will put on condition a little bit earlier. They're typically higher marbling, and they're also noted for their maternal ability. And on average, they will be, from a breed group perspective, they will typically be a little bit lighter muscle, easier fleshing, higher marbling than, per se, if we compared them to our continental group or even our American group.
The Shorthorn breed classification, again, falling within the British division at major shows and regional shows and county livestock shows as well. Again, one of those breeds that brings up a lot of interest from the standpoint of classification. The number one rule to qualify as a Shorthorn, again, the steer must physically exhibit the characteristics of a purebred Shorthorn individual, and again, that is key. We still need to look like a British type steer in this case. What we look for, and again, color, one of the critical factor in classification of Shorthorns. A Shorthorn can be a solid red. They can be white with evidence of red or red pigmentation around the muzzle, the ears, around the tail head as well. Or you can have a combination of red, or any combination of red and white from the standpoint of mixing, from the standpoint of roans. If they're a true red and white, again, we look for an animal that would have some bleeding type characteristics along that line of red and white. And then again, an individual that has the characteristics of the Shorthorn from the standpoint of a smooth joints, structure that appears to be Shorthorn. On the absolute disqualifications, and again, it makes it maybe a little easier as far as classification. Any individual that would come through with black, with blue roan, of course, that is an automatic disqualification. An individual that might be solid white with no evidence of red on the ears, on the muzzle, around the tail head, a solid white steer would be a disqualification. Other disqualifying type factors would be an individual coming through the line that had maybe a dilute or color pattern, heavy orange, yellow roans, colors like that, again, would be a reason to classify a Shorthorn out. Any individual that comes through as far as double muscle would be a factor, an automatic factor to disqualify a Shorthorn in the line out. As far as getting into grayer areas, to use a double term on words, some red flags that come out on the classification line of Shorthorns. Maybe a steer that has a motley face or a brockle face would be a discriminatory factor. However, a brindle steer that might come through would be an automatic disqualification. Steers, as they come through the line, that might have a black nose pigment can be okay, but again, it's going to cause a red flag within the classifier's mind. Steers that are lighter red, maybe in that oranges type spectrum, again, are some characteristics that might cause a classifier to look. The coarser the joint structure, not so much the bone size or the bone circumference, but the coarseness of the joints, again, giving indication of maybe a heavier exotic type influence will cause a classifier to maybe look again on a steer that comes through the line. As we go through and look at individual steers as examples, a steer that comes through, again, a kind of a classic redder neck roan type steer, again, really nice in that Shorthorn head and face region, the good roaning throughout with some blue roaning, an automatic disqualification based on color alone. We go through the line again, and a lot of steers more classically patterned example of a Shorthorn. Some roaning there, a definite bleeding throughout the color pattern, the way that he presents himself. Again, a fairly smooth, structured, smooth jointed type steer that fits the Shorthorn classification fairly easily. Another one much the same type from the standpoint of that roaning type pattern throughout, kind of that long face, smooth jointed type steer, gets through fairly easily. And now when we get to the solid colors from the standpoint of red, maybe the flags go up just a notch more, but again a steer that starts to exhibit maybe a coarser jointed. If you notice on the rear hocks, again, maybe not quite as smooth as some of our previous examples. This steer is going to be one that would be a two chipper in some opinions from the standpoint of two chips good, two chips maybe not being for Shorthorn, but he just causes a few more red flags to come up, and there are some steers that there are no easy answers for from the standpoint of there may be some risk associated with them. But take away the color from the standpoint of just his joint structure, maybe the way the musculature jumps out at some point could cause some classifiers some concern. A solid red steer like this, smooth jointed, again, he might have an easier time being a Shorthorn that day. We look at a steer here that, again, that white steer in the skin, but he does have evidence of freckling and red hair on that ear set, some around the nose as well. Again, it makes it easier to be a Shorthorn, no doubt. Then we get to a steer, again, he's red in color, but if you'll notice this steer, again, coarser in his joint structure, in the way that his musculature puts together and presents itself, a steer that may be more on the exotic side, a much tougher time for a steer such as this to go through and be classified as a Shorthorn.